Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Instigator podcast. We are coming to you with a special interview edition of the podcast. We were lucky enough to have Peter Marlette join us on this week's show. He is leading the charge to bring a USL Championship club to Buffalo. He is the man behind Buffalo Pro Soccer, and we had the opportunity to speak with him in a wide-ranging interview talking about all of the work being done to bring a professional soccer team to Buffalo, the work he has to do to secure a stadium site and get that built, to bring in partners, you name it. He is taking on a mammoth undertaking, and he's been doing a great job of it through the last 8 months. So I really hope you enjoyed this conversation. Tyler and I certainly enjoyed having Peter join the show. And if you're anything like me, this will leave you even that much more excited for the arrival of the Buffalo USL club. I really hope you enjoyed this interview. It was a really, really fun one to do. So, Peter, I want to thank you for joining the show. This is very exciting to have a chance to chat with you. And just to kick things off, can you give everyone a little bit of background on your title, your role, and what you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, of course. And thanks for having me. Really excited to be talking about this with you guys. So my name's Peter Marlette. I'm the president of Buffalo Pro Soccer. So Buffalo Pro Soccer is the holding company that owns the rights to USL Championship and Super League, which is the top division of women's professional soccer, pro soccer here in Western New York and Buffalo specifically. So I acquired those rights at the beginning of this year. So, roughly 8.5 months ago now. But it was a long process coming prior to getting this opportunity and being offered this opportunity by the executives at USL, the league. I was running the team as general manager of Union Omaha in USL League One for the past 3 seasons and did so very successfully. And that's what led to this opportunity here in Buffalo.
Yeah, and you had started with Union Omaha. It was 2021 your first season, correct?
Yes, correct. 21, 22, and 23 seasons were
Okay.
what I was there for. And yeah, we won the league, won the regular season and the playoffs in 21. In 22, we had a very deep U.S. Open Cup run, beating a few MLS teams along the way. And then last year in the 23 season, we won the regular season and then went out in the shootout in the semifinals. But on the field, it was 3 very successful years, and financially, we did a pretty nice job as well. So again, that's being from Buffalo and having that experience in the USL professional ecosystem is what led to this opportunity.
And what role does the GM play in with a USL club? Because I think most Buffalo sports fans, especially those who aren't really attuned to soccer, are probably going to assume things like you would find in the Bills or the Sabres. Are you taking on more of a role with the
Yeah,
USL club?
well, yes. So the kind of traditional GM role that you think of with Brandon Beane and Kevin Adams, that is what I do, or what I did in Omaha in my GM role. But then that was only half of the job. The other half of the job was also managing the front office and business operation on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, it varies club to club because we all get to build our front offices how we choose. But in Omaha, it was that, head of the sporting operation that Buffalo fans would traditionally associate with the GM role. And then also, whatever the title might be in a different club, but whatever, president or a VP of business ops or COO or something like that. That was the other half of it as well.
And so when you were with Omaha, obviously that's USL League One. So the Buffalo venture is jumping up a level to USL Championship. And basically for those who are unaware, that's the level right below MLS. So you'd get obviously a step up in competition, a step up in skill level, and everything like that. How does player recruitment, signing players, and stuff like that, differ from a USL League One or a USL two like FC Buffalo compared to a USL Championship?
Yeah, well, we should separate USL 2
Right,
and
because it's
then
amateur. Right.
exactly. So that's a totally different operation. USL League 2 is excellent, but it's
Right.
amateur. It's a summer league for
Mhm.
college players and unsigned pros for whatever reason. So I, that's totally separate. But the difference between League 1 and Championship in terms of process, is negligible at most. I mean, it's all the same idea. You're just dealing with different numbers, higher salaries, higher transfer fees, higher player values, stuff like that. But the process is completely the same. And what differentiates USL from MLS in that way, and what I love about USL, is there's no draft, which MLS still does have the player draft every year. So we go out and we try to sign the best players, and nobody holds their rights. And if somebody does, we can make an offer to buy them or something of that nature. But we have to recruit players, make the best offer, make the best sales pitch, and be better at finding players than our competition, because it's a global market. There's a lot of good players in the world who don't have a team right now. So we have to go find them more efficiently and more effectively than our opponents, because there is no draft system, no way to reserve them or anything like that.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like not having that draft kind of, I don't want to say simplifies it, but kind of makes things a little less complicated in that you don't have to go through the allocation money song and dance in terms of player acquisition and player trading as MLS does and stuff like that. So it's really down to, as you said, just acquisition, player identification and kind of pitching your project to, whomever that player, whoever that player is.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the MLS, they need to just scrap the model that they currently have, because they've kept evolving it to allow teams to spend more money, allow teams to bring in more players of sort of a certain caliber and stuff like that. But they keep trying to add new rules and new wrinkles to a system that's just too complicated now and unnecessarily complicated now.
Right.
USL, we find the players, we make our pitch, we try to bring them here. And we compete with everybody else in the same arena.
And so now that that's the case, and you do have a lot of established, name brand clubs, even at that level, you think of Tampa Bay Rowdies and Pittsburgh Riverhounds are obviously closer. I'm a Chelsea nerd, so, Didier Drogba was down with Phoenix Rising a couple of years ago. When you're going through the process and you're at Omaha, and obviously, being a local guy, a little bit of a soft spot for the area, but what was it about Buffalo that, you identified that said to you, okay, this market, there's an opportunity here. There's not only an opportunity for a team, there's missing a pro team. And not only is it missing a pro team, but, there's all the pieces in place to be successful.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, it was not just 8 months ago or a year ago that I identified that, and I was not the first to identify that. Buffalo has been a great market for a USL level club for a decade now. It has improved every year over the past decade. And when I say improved, I mean, we know that the demographics of this area are starting to get younger. We know that it's getting more international, and those are good demographic indicators for professional soccer in the U.S. But Buffalo's been a phenomenal USL market for a long time now, and the league knew that. They made some bad choices in trying to get a team here in the past, and that prevented it. But truthfully, I think I got lucky that this opportunity was still available, because somebody should have done this 10 years ago. And it's only the market has only improved in that time since then. So yeah, what you look at for a successful USL market is typically a population of north of 1 million, which Buffalo, Western New York certainly has. And then when you incorporate Southern Ontario, which is part of our protected territory, and obviously the Bills and Sabres draw so well from the Niagara region, that's a population of about 500,000 right there. So that brings our total population well into the top 15, top 10% of USL clubs, Championship and League One, all over USL clubs. You're looking for a good youth soccer, tradition and atmosphere, and youth soccer is huge here in Buffalo, and there's a lot of great big clubs around here. You look for a good sports city, and nobody in this country is going to look at Buffalo and not consider it one of the best sports cities in the country. And there are other, if you really want to dig into the details, there are other demographic indicators, median household income that Buffalo matches up very nicely with, levels of higher education that Buffalo looks very good with. So basically, every demographic indicator or every requirement that you're looking for in a USL market, Buffalo checks all those boxes and has for a long time. And then what it comes down to is stadium location, stadium opportunity, and proper management. You mentioned Phoenix Rising. That's a club that's owned by, was founded initially by a guy named Brett Johnson, who has since founded and is part of the ownership group, or is the principal owner of Rhode Island FC, which is the expansion club in USL Championship this year. And he and his partner bought Ipswich Town, or a significant stake of Ipswich Town, 2 years ago when they were in the third division of English soccer, and have gotten them promoted up to the Premier League in 2 straight years, which is the Wrexham story gets all this credit and gets all this incredible publicity. Ipswich has done something at least as impressive as what they've done. Brett Johnson and Phoenix Rising, that's a much bigger population, much bigger metropolitan area than Buffalo, but they didn't have an MLS team. They weren't getting one, it seemed, at the time. And he went and put USL there and built a stadium there. And that's one of the most successful clubs in the league, both on the field, but also financially and from a, business sustainability model.
And so as you're going through all this process, and as you mentioned, you have the demographic info, you have the background on the region, being able to identify it as a good fit. And you even kind of alluded to prior attempts to bring a USL club here. And so your goal is 2026. And I'm curious to know, like, at any point, did you feel that it was maybe too ambitious to be aiming for 2026?
There was no point, and continues to be, 8 months, officially 8 months into the project now, that I felt like it was too ambitious. There was also no point that I felt that it wasn't highly ambitious. It is a quick turnaround, especially having to build a stadium, which we have to do here in Buffalo. But there's no reason that it can't be done right now. If circumstances arise for whatever reason, construction, whatever it may be, that it has to get pushed a year, that's not the end of the world, and the franchise agreement doesn't go away or anything like that. But the goal of 26, yes, it's ambitious, but we're completely on track for it right now. So I'm not, no. To answer the question, no, there hasn't been a point where I felt that it was too ambitious.
And the reason I ask is because I feel like, in a way, it kind of to your point, by giving yourself that shorter runway than, say, targeting 2030, it doesn't create any potential for complacency or additional red tape to get in the way and things like that. So, in many ways, I think it's advantageous to have the slightly shorter runway that you guys have. But
well, it definitely makes my conversations with investors and potential investors and other stakeholders, landowners, public officials, whatever it may be, it puts urgency on all of those conversations too. And that's not necessarily a bad thing to make sure that they all know in those meetings, here's your opportunity. I got to move fast. So if you're not interested, I'm going to move on to the next person and see what happens. It puts pressure on everything, no doubt, but adding a little pressure to some of those external parties that I need to come in is not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, I think, especially talking about building a stadium, but Buffalo's development history the last 15 years, it's a little urgency is a good thing for sure. So,
Exactly.
And you said you're on track, which is super encouraging to hear. I'm curious to know, like, what are, and I mean, maybe even were within the last 8 months, like, what were the big benchmarks that you've been working through?
Yeah. So most important, I've had to secure seed funding and investment in this project to pay for everything that comes along with doing this pre-work on a club, basically. The seed funding being secured was a big project, but a big success. There are a lot of people in Buffalo and Western New York who have invested, I won't say how much and I won't say who they are, but I'll tell you it's a good amount of money. These are not small checks coming in. I've got a minimum requirement that is significant. And there's people who've bought in, literally and figuratively. So securing that seed funding and getting to the point that I'm at now, from a bank account investment standpoint, was a huge milestone, and that's been a success. And that said, it's been a success, and I've got plenty to keep things moving forward. Still in that process, though. Still pitching investors every day. I've got 2 meetings tomorrow with potential investors. The other one, the big milestone here is signing a letter of intent on a stadium site and moving forward towards getting shovels in the ground by early next year, that's the time frame right now. And recently, within the past month, I have brought on Simonelli Development to handle all of my pre-development work at the sites and assess the finalist sites from a pure development standpoint. I know from my experience, and I have hired consultants with great soccer experience who know that from a soccer standpoint, these sites will work. I need these developers to tell me what is better from a development standpoint. You're not talking, whether it's a stadium or whatever it is, this is a multi-million dollar development. So I need them to come in. So I brought on Simonelli about a month ago now. They've done a great job and are far along in the process of assessing all these sites. We have weekly meetings. I hired Wendell as an architect. They've been working on renderings and they've been doing feasibility studies at these finalist sites as well. And then I brought on a group called CSL International, which is a major sports business firm. And what they do is market assessments for professional sports stadiums. And I brought them on to do that as well recently. So that was a major milestone right there. Getting those groups in, getting those experts in. And the way that we got there, the way that happened was, I hit those seed round goals, which allow me to afford paying them to do this work, because it's not inexpensive, but it's absolutely necessary if we're going to be building a stadium for 2026.
And in terms of the stadium, that's obviously it's terrific progress with those finalist sites and kind of crossing those T's, dotting those I's that all need to be done. In terms of the stadium itself, I'm going to go on a limb and say it's going to be a soccer specific stadium, but in terms of USL Championship and the types of stadiums that they play in, what are you looking for in terms of that stadium, in terms of atmosphere and kind of capacity? Like what are you aiming for there in terms of, in 2 years or a year and a half, I guess now, as we're almost into 2025, what is your ideal size for, a sold out USL Championship Buffalo Stadium?
Yeah, it is, depending on the site, capacity of roughly 10,000 is the answer to that question. And it could fluctuate depending on the site. But you look at comparable markets in USL, Detroit right now is playing in an 8,000 capacity stadium, and they always sell it out. And they've actually just secured funding and land to build a new stadium in downtown Detroit for that club. So they've outgrown their 8,000 capacity stadium. Actually, frankly, they were probably bigger than that from the start, but finally are able to expand. You look at a Louisville City who built a $120 million stadium in near downtown Louisville. That's a 14,000 seat or capacity, give or take. Colorado Springs, right around 11,000. Those markets that are similar to Buffalo and do well as businesses, that's about the number that you want to be at. But you also, and this is something that the architects have been well aware of since day one in their ideation and their process of forming the renderings for this stadium, we want to be able to expand. We want to be able to grow with the club if and when that becomes necessary. So if you're not thinking about that from day one, 5 years from now, when we think, oh, we can add another 5,000 seats to this stadium, it can be really difficult and really expensive. But if the architects have that in mind from their pre-development stage, there can be plans for that in place if and when the time comes.
And so you've mentioned, I know in previous press availabilities earlier in the year, there's mentioned, like I think you specifically called maybe a modular stadium.
Yep.
Is that still the target as a result of that?
Yes, yeah, definitely. The modular, for a ton of reasons, is the right choice for this project right now. Certainly, one of them being this tight time frame. If we're doing a traditional build stadium, we are not playing in 26. It just, the construction alone will take too long. Also, from a cost standpoint, the modular, which can be, again, it's going to be designed, custom built for our needs by expert architects. So it's not, it's not an erector set. It's not something that is, uncustomizable. It'll be completely custom. But it costs a third of the price of the equivalent stadium, at least. So, from a time and a financial standpoint, it makes perfect sense. But also, it is more easily extendable, expandable if we do need to increase our capacity, which we, kind of expect to in the not too distant future. It just provides so much more flexibility for us. Phoenix Rising, we'll go back to them. They're playing in their third iteration of their modular stadium this season. The first one, they expanded because they quickly realized they had outgrown their first modular, almost within a year, they outgrew that. And then they just got an opportunity to get some unbelievable land in a great site. And because they were modular, they were able to do that without having to abandon, some, white elephant stadium might be an exaggeration, but without having to abandon a stadium somewhere. They didn't create that problem for themselves. So the flexibility is also a major reason why at the USL level, especially, modular makes a ton of sense. But I mean, Inter Miami plays in a modular stadium right now in Fort Lauderdale too. So it's not like this is a cheap structure or something like that. These are great stadiums.
Well, and you bring up the point, the cost aspect of it and the construction timeline. I mean, Milwaukee's proposed stadium was quoted at 220 million. They haven't broke ground yet, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I'm aware. I mean, and that thing's going to be, I can't imagine how much more in today's dollars than when they first proposed it. So I get it totally. I think it makes total sense. And I'm sure that you can't divulge your sites, but I know that you also said the city was important to you as well to play in. And can you just give a little bit more on the background on the decision to really focus on a city site versus, you know, whether it be a Williamsville, Amherst, you know, South Towns, whatever?
Yeah. A lot of those suburbs, all the ones that you just mentioned, would make sense for various reasons as well. Because they have great youth soccer communities. There's a decent population density. It could work there. But it has been proven time and time again in American pro soccer. City or urban stadiums financially perform better than suburban or ex-urban stadiums. It's just time and time again we are seeing that at USL, at MLS, at NW, whatever level of professional soccer in the U.S. The city stadium does better. Also, in Buffalo specifically, it could be argued, and I certainly feel this way, that the city of Buffalo, not having the Bills back in Orchard Park, lost a major opportunity. And there were a lot of reasons why that maybe wasn't necessarily going to be feasible in Buffalo. That's a totally different undertaking than what we're doing. But a downtown stadium, a city of Buffalo stadium of this size, it's, first of all, completely feasible, much more realistic, much more doable. And it can still be a catalyst for development of the city and whatever neighborhood it goes in. So the main reason is that it's proven time and time again in the U.S., a city stadium does better than a suburban stadium from a financial and usage standpoint. So that makes it pretty easy right there. But also recent history in Buffalo, and me being somebody who grew up in the city of Buffalo, and who loves this city, the opportunity to build a stadium in the city of Buffalo is pretty special. So that's been important. That said, I explored everything, and I had consultants explore everything. It's not like we came in only considering the city. It just, those are the sites that have come to the top.
Right. And I totally agree. I think it's really a chance to energize things. And I think, to your point, it's like 10,000 seat venue is almost more conducive to the offshoot developments that NFL stadiums tend to promise but underdeliver on. And I want to serve it back over to Tyler here for any questions that he has too. But last one for me on this, at least in the stadium aspects, at that size, and obviously USL season is longer than, again, comparatively an NFL season would be. But do you foresee additional events being hosted at the stadium, or do you want to keep it soccer specific? What's the goal there?
No, and I'm glad, because actually, Tyler, you said it, and I forgot to follow up on it. This is getting built as a soccer specific stadium, yes, but that also means it's a rectangular field of play. Sure, it's purpose built for soccer, but you can paint football, lacrosse, field hockey, ultimate frisbee, rugby, whatever. You can make it a stadium for virtually any field sport, certainly any rectangular field sport. And we definitely plan on doing that, and hosting all different kinds of sports at this stadium. But also, and I can't go into too many details, but I had a 2-hour meeting with my architect and a major concert venue owner here in Buffalo, talking, and the whole purpose of the conversation, this was today, this was a couple hours ago, this meeting, the whole purpose of it was so that our architect from day one or whatever, early in the process, be hearing from somebody who has made their living and made their life operating concert venues, what needs to be considered in building this so that it can be a great 10 to 15,000 capacity concert and event venue as well. Because there are just so many things came out in this meeting that in building a sports specific stadium, a soccer stadium that can be extended to different sports, we just wouldn't have thought of the acoustics of it, the certain certain angles that we need things to be at. We never would have thought of that. Loading docks for equipment trucks, stuff like that. Things that we wouldn't have thought of, but this guy was able to come in and say, no, you need to flip this in the rendering, you need to add this, and no, the goal of this stadium is not to host 17 to 25 USL Championship games a year. It's to be hosting all different sports at all different levels, and then ideally some pretty decent sized concerts and events and outdoor activities.
I mean, for me, I think that's terrific to hear. Chris, you and I have talked about, sort of the need to, just from a music only perspective, there isn't that, as you said, 10 to 15,000 outdoor venue bar Darien Lake, which
exactly.
It might be the greatest public service ever.
I don't
might
like
be your best public
anymore.
service getting Darien Lake out of the picture.
Yeah.
Well, and you think about it, how many acts are there nationally, globally, that don't come to Buffalo because that venue doesn't exist right now?
Right.
They're not going to sell out, the arena, or they're not going to sell out Ralph Wilson, but
Town Ballroom's a little small.
Town Ballroom's not going to cut it, So yeah, exactly. Yeah.
For me, just to go back to the soccer side of it and the development, and you talked about how, this is really a strong soccer community, obviously in terms of support, but also in terms of participation. And one of really the strong points in terms of that participation is something like the Flash Academy. Is that something, and again, if you can't disclose, that's completely fine. But as you build this thing up from the ground, I know you have the rights, to eventually bring along a women's side. But as you build the senior team and try to bring in homegrown talent, which I know is something, local talent, which is something that I know that's really important to you. Are you looking to, partner with, something like the Flash Academy or even FC Buffalo, or are you trying to kind of start your own lane where, as we talked about USL2 being separate, is that something that they're kind of operating in their own little, I don't want to say little, but their own area, whereas, because of the different structure that a professional league presents, that you're going to be looking to kind of develop talent in another way?
No. So first of all, I played for FC Buffalo however many years ago. So and it was Nick Mendola was the owner back then too.
Yeah, he's
so
terrific.
Nick and I have a great relationship. Truthfully, keeping an amateur soccer team of that level alive for the 15 years that he has is an accomplishment in itself. That's difficult to do year in, year out. And there have been some good pros that have come through FC Buffalo. And, when it was NPSL and now in USL too. So no, Nick and I have had plenty of conversations about how this may look going forward. Having a USL 2 team in Buffalo to complement the professionals, whether that is FC Buffalo or some different collaboration between the current FC Buffalo and what we're building. I don't know exactly what that structure looks like, but having a USL 2 team to serve as a reserve team for the pros is it's a no-brainer. You'd be stupid not to take advantage of that in some way. The academy side is a little more complicated because, Flash does do very well, especially on the girls' side. Flash is a quality program, and there are other quality youth soccer clubs in this area. But USL does have an academy, and they have the USL Academy Cup and the USL Academy Leagues, and we will be participating in those. Exactly what that looks like from a collaboration with local clubs, we're in early conversations, but nothing's been finalized yet on that. But no, we will have teams participating in the USL youth competitions. And that is tremendously important because the truth is, so in Omaha, I brought in one player from Buffalo at least every year for a week-long trial. always just begging to find one that we could sign. And it just, we couldn't. There wasn't, they were very good players, players that were good enough for me to bring in with a bunch of pros and, national team players and stuff like that. And they could hold their own and do fine. But we never got to a point where we could offer one of them a contract. And with the top of the pyramid here in Buffalo, with the professional team here in Buffalo and an academy structure underneath it, we should be able to identify those players at a younger age. It's way different finding a great talent at 14 or 15 than 20 or 21. By 20 or 21, if the coaching hasn't been there for the past few years, they probably missed it. They're probably not there anymore. You could even say that about 18 or 19 to a degree. But if you've got the pro team and you've got the academy structure beneath it here in Buffalo, and you've got good relationships with the clubs at the recreational and youth level, you can identify those players at that 13, 14, 15 years old, and then ensure that the training that they're getting is appropriate to build them into professionals, and ideally sign them with the first team and get them minutes with the first team at the beginning of their hopefully long professional career. But the players out of Buffalo or Western New York who have made it as pros have almost done it despite the system that we're currently in right now. It's been way too difficult for way too many talented players to make it to the top level. And it's just because the infrastructure hasn't been there yet. And we're going to build that.
That's really good to hear. I also know that you had a couple town halls recently. I want to say your last one was last month. I want to say now, as we're into the middle of August here. What, if anything, were you able to glean from those in terms of, the reception the public seems to have for you so far, the excitement level, stuff like that?
Yeah. So the last one was in July, and we did it in Williamsville at Lloyd's Taco Factory out there, and they were awesome hosts. The one before that was at Orchard Park at Wayland Brewing. And we're doing these monthly now, at Orchard Park at Wayland Brewing. Wayland was amazing. And then Orchard Park Soccer Club turned out in huge numbers for that. And the first one we did was at the Banshee on Franklin Street downtown, which is an amazing soccer bar that when I moved away, I left Buffalo about 8 years ago to really pursue this career, full speed ahead, I guess, and at the highest levels. Banshee didn't exist. So I had never been there before I went to see if we were going to host this town hall there. Banshee, we budgeted, and I say we because I work with the Martin Group for my marketing and PR. We kind of budgeted for 60 people at the Banshee plus media maybe, and it was 120 plus on that first one. It was absolutely packed. Too many people for the room that we had elected to go to. So the reception for these town halls has been overwhelming, and I think it speaks to the appetite for professional soccer here in Buffalo. And we've got the English Premier League season starting up next week, and Banshee's going to be absolutely overflowing with people, for those games. And that speaks to, like I said, the appetite and the passion for pro soccer that Buffalo has. What I am trying to get out of those is, of course, an opportunity for those that want to show up to hear from me and to get an update. Like that's part of it. That's important. And those that do show up do want to hear from me. But really what I want to get out of those is I want to hear from the people that care enough to show up to that, what they are looking for in a club. Those town halls are as much me speaking as they are me asking questions to the crowd. I know what works at the USL level. Like I said, I've done this successfully for years now, and I worked at the MLS level. I worked over in Europe. I've done this. I know what works in USL, but I can't assume that all of my opinions about what professional soccer in Buffalo should look like are what Buffalo wants it to look like. I need to hear from the people that care about it and who are theoretically going to be in the stands cheering the team on. I need to hear how they want it to build and how they want the club to represent them properly. I can't assume that I know the answers to those without getting out in the community and hearing the actual answers from the people that care.
Excellent.
What would have been the most common pieces of feedback you've gotten? I assume maybe the most popular questions are stadium and uniform related, but yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe beyond that, what's been the most common refrain you've heard, or the most, whether it be a question or just feedback in general?
Yeah. So first of all, it's always that I will always get the first two questions. One is, where's the stadium going? And two is, what's the team name? What are the colors? That'll happen in every one. But no, I am often hearing the question that Tyler asked, how will this integrate with FC Buffalo, and then also the youth soccer scene, the youth soccer environment here in Buffalo. That's a pretty common one. And one that I get, I've gotten at every one so far, is Buffalo's a traditional hockey and football town. How do you really think soccer, is professional soccer is going to work here in Buffalo? I've gotten that question at every single one so far. And my answer is always the same: is yeah, Buffalo is an amazing hockey and football town. But that's because Buffalo is an amazing sports town. You go to the Banshee, you go to Mesquite, you go to any bar that's playing Premier League games or men's national team or women's national team games, and there are people on the sidewalks watching those games. It is absolutely packed. And those are for teams that the national teams obviously represent us, but the English Premier League teams, Tyler, you mentioned you're a big Chelsea fan. I don't know if you're from London, but it's that club doesn't represent you unless you are from unless
I'm not from London, and they just keep signing 19-year-old kids now that I've never even heard of. So we're just gonna let that one go, because we could talk for another hour about that.
Yeah, I'm sure. But anyways, what I'm saying is, you see these bars get absolutely packed for clubs that people aren't from there. They picked it years ago for whatever reason, and they're passionate about that team. This is going to be a professional soccer team that is in Buffalo, that was built from the ground up by somebody from Buffalo, by stakeholders, investors from Buffalo, for people in Buffalo, to represent the city of Buffalo. So I just think the Bills and Sabres do so well, not because Buffalo does love hockey and football, but it's because Buffalo loves Buffalo sports, and we're going to represent this city and this market as well as any team.
So, Tyler, did you have another follow up there? Because I know I kind of jumped in on you.
No, you know what? That's terrific, and I couldn't agree more in terms of, you even look at the Bandits and other teams like that, and I don't know if there's any city that would be considered a lacrosse town, but if the team's got Buffalo in its name, people are gonna show up for it and support it, and so long as the product is good, they're gonna keep coming back. Which
exactly.
obviously you've got the experience, you've been successful at the level that you're entering in, so there's no reason to suggest that won't come in time. So I think it's a terrific opportunity. I'm, for one, excited. Chris and I have talked about it. I think really when the first announcement came out, it was I think me and him were texting within 10 minutes of seeing it. So I can speak for myself and anecdotally that word is getting out there, and the excitement level will only continue to build once shovels are in the ground for the stadium, and some more of those tangible signs of pro soccer start trickling into the city or wherever the stadium ends up.
Yeah, and I think you're exactly right. Buffalo's a great sports town. Buffalo loves teams that represent them. People, people will show up. People will come out and take a look at it. But it's not a given that they're always going to turn up every game just because we have Buffalo on our jersey. We need to put a product on the field and build a stadium and put a product in the front office and all of the above that represent Buffalo properly. We can't just assume because this is a great market and that this is a great sports town that we're just going to be blindly supported just because we've created a team here. We're going to endeavor, we're going to need to work hard, and we're going to be under a lot of pressure to be competing to win meaningful games, playoffs, championships, etc., Open Cup games. And also playing in a way that gives the fans something to cheer for and in a way that represents the city of Buffalo. They're going to turn up because there's curiosity at first and because there's excitement around, hey, pro soccer in Buffalo. But the fans aren't just going to keep showing up because of that novelty. We're going to need to put something special in the stadium, in the front office, and on the field.
Right. And I guess the last one for me, and when we're discussing the fans and them showing up, and then, the work that goes into making sure that they continue to do so. Was there anything from the USL headquarters in terms of fans or potential, ticket deposits or anything like that? When we think of expansion clubs, whether, the NHL has done a little bit more recently than the other ones, but obviously they're one of their first steps, if not their first step, is okay, well, you need to have the season ticket drive. You need to show that there's a demand for the product. We talked earlier about the demographics and the participation and how just about every box for this area has been checked, but has the league really gone into any okay, yes, you have the youth participation, you have the metro population, but what can you show me in terms of these people are definitely going to come for the first X amount of years?
Yeah. So no, we have not done our season ticket deposit drive platform, whatever you want to call it yet. But that will be coming. And the reason we haven't done it, it's been a conscious decision not to do it yet, is because we want to finalize our stadium site before we're asking people to commit to coming to that location. We don't want people going in blind. So that's the reason. That's the primary reason that we haven't done the season ticket deposit drive yet. But some indicators. There are other indicators than season ticket deposits. If you look at our first 2 weeks of media coverage after, we broke the news and it was on the front page of the Buffalo News and on every local news channel and everything like that. The earned media value in those stories for those first 2 weeks was almost $9 million. So that exceeded our expectations by multiples. But what it speaks to is that this is a market that was engaging with that story and that was interested. These news outlets aren't going to keep producing stories unless they are getting those stories read and getting clicks and whatever it may be. So the fact that this announcement generated that type of excitement, that's a pretty good indication that the market is ready for this.
And so that kind of speaks to my last question is, you and whether this is additional town halls, or other other media work. What are maybe the most short term or near term goals and maybe punch list items that you have to now complete here, as we approach the end of 2024?
Yeah, well, we're going to keep doing town halls every month. So actually, our August town hall is getting replaced with a different event that I can't announce yet, but will be public pretty soon. But we'll be doing a once monthly town hall going forward. So that's pretty standard. Really, going to keep this seed round going and keep, raising capital and ownership, because that's always going to be important. These are expensive to get off the ground, despite the early success and the, pretty good surplus we have right now. Got to keep building that up, because we will spend it. And then we really need, the three kind of stadium partners that I mentioned earlier. We need their reports. We need their work to get done. And we need to sign a letter of intent on a stadium and get a path forward on that stadium, because really the principal investor, the principal owner, is a requirement of the U.S. Soccer Federation. That's an individual who owns a minimum of 35% of the team, of the business. And that's going to be a pretty significant check. And my feeling, and the feeling of the league from their, however many expansion teams they've done over the past decade, is that won't come. The conversations can be great, and they have been, but that check won't get written until there's a path forward on the stadium, a written path forward on the stadium. So that is, everything else is happening. The marketing's going great. The PR is going great. The town halls are excellent. The seed round, the minority investment's going great. But right now we need to do all that, but sign a letter of intent on this stadium soon enough, on this stadium site soon enough, and put a path forward, because that's really going to be the catalyst to get that principal investor. And then shovels go in the ground, and then staff starts getting hired off. You know what I mean? That's when everything really starts to happen. So the big deliverable, the big upcoming deliverable, is picking a stadium site and running with it.
So easy stuff then, you're saying?
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, nothing big.
No, not easy, and it's by far the biggest aspect of this entire operation. But I brought on experts in this and local experts in this to do their work. And they're doing it really well so far. And so I have no reason to not expect us to stay on path.
Awesome. Well, that's it for me. Tyler, you said you had anything else, Ty?
That is it for me. It was, it was really informative and great to have you on, Peter.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it, guys. Thank you for having me and for the time. And those were, you guys know your stuff or did your research, because those were good questions.
Well, we can only watch European soccer for so long before we want one in the backyard.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Cool. So, yeah, thank you again, Peter, for joining us. This was great.